Hi, I'm Daniel Greenberg, and today we'll be discussing my usability assessment of the Steam desktop application. I chose to assess Steam, both for its significance to the desktop gaming community, as well as my own personal experience finding some of its features to be unintuitive or hard to find. To see if others had similar usability issues, I selected 5 random volunteers and interviewed them on their opinions of the platform. Then, I observed them as they completed different tasks, and measured how much they struggled engaging with these features. Even though all of the participants are active users of Steam, they each experienced some level of difficulty for at least one of the tasks. My methodology for this assessment first allowed me to gain a general overview of the platform's design. Then, I collected and analyzed user-based sentiment, and finally, recorded live engagement with the user interface. Starting with the heuristic analysis. This refers to 10 guidelines used for quantifying the usability of a design. By grading the platform against these guidelines, I was able to form a hypothesis about where users would struggle the most based off of the lowest scoring heuristics. Then, I found 5 random participants and interviewed them on their opinions of the platform, which I compared against my hypothesis and used to help build my lab test experiment. Finally, I needed to test my hypothesis by observing participants actually engage with the platform. This allowed me to gather data on user struggle and see where participant attention was drawn as they became confused trying to find their target web page. Some participants seemed to lose their goal-directed attention as they appeared to become overwhelmed by stimuli on the page. The tasks the participants had to complete were general actions that any user of the platform may find themselves wanting to perform at some point or another. These included social activities, moderating exposure to mature content in the store, and locating accessibility features. I graded the platform against each heuristic on a scale from 1 to 3. For every heuristic that scored a 2 or less, I selected it as a potential usability issue, with the exception of error recovery, as Steam typically does such a good job of error prevention that it's rare to encounter an error in the first place. From this assessment, I found that Steam is actually fairly well designed, with some of its greatest strengths being how informative and functional it is. However, the way this information is communicated detracts from its minimalist design, as there's typically too much happening on a page at any given time, making it cluttered and hard to navigate. I selected 3 heuristics as potential usability issues, and examples as of why for each. Recognition rather than recall is on the list, because certain important UI elements lack visibility, such as the friends in chat and the game gift code buttons. Aesthetic and minimalism is missing from places such as the store page, where you have 3 different navigation ribbons, 2 different drop-downs, and redundant options between the 2 of them. Finally, consistency and standards. For many modern social applications, the chat feature is denoted by a speech bubble. And even the Steam mobile app uses this iconography. But the Steam desktop app does not. I applied these ratings to my hypothesis, which I used for the rest of the assessment. While the contextual inquiry didn't provide any opinions that directly validated my hypothesis, it was helpful for identifying underused features, which could be symptomatic of the feature either being hard to use or simply unwanted. Either way, an underused feature just provides clutter that distracts from the features that are wanted. Here in this plot, we can see how the chat and the inventory were seldom used by our participants. These are the experiment's task completion times, which are a contextual reference that can be compared to alongside the difficulty measurement. From a glance at this graph, it can be inferred that Task 5 posed the greatest challenge to participants, as it has the highest average completion time, and 2 of the participants failed to complete it outright. The more conclusive metric is the difficulty measurement, which gauges whether participants struggled to complete tasks, with struggle defined by a threshold of 5 or more difficulty points. From these results, we can see that participants experienced the most difficulty in tasks 4 and 5, with almost all the participants struggling to complete Task 5. Additionally, Participant 4 experienced the most difficulty overall in the experiment, coming close to, if not struggling, in all of the tasks but one. The most common mistakes in Task 5 were clicking on the Filter and Collection buttons, and right-clicking on the games and space around the gallery and list views. Now, I would like to make some recommendations based off of the findings from the assessments. Most importantly, starting with findings from Task 5, which challenged participants to change the scale of the game icons in the library. Participants were directed to the gallery view at the start of the task, and unprompted, 40% of them expressed that they didn't even know the gallery view existed. This suggests that a considerable number of users only know how to view their games through the list view, which, considering how small it is an accessibility issue. And since even experienced participants struggled to change the scale of their UI, this is not accommodating for users who actually need the accessibility settings. Fortunately, there's a variety of simple-to-implement solutions to this. First, the solution that all of the participants seem to look for when completing Task 5 would be to add a view drop-down right next to the filter. This would provide a list of icon sizes similar to how the Windows File Explorer does it. Some additional complementary solutions would be to allow the user to right-click the space between game icons to access a menu, which then provides the different icon sizes. And the user can hold down the control button and use the scroll wheel to enlarge and shrink icon sizes directly. Alternatively, all the shelves at the top of the page can be removed, and it can be solely dedicated to the gallery view, which, while it does exist on this page, there's no indication to the user that scrolling further down will reveal it. However, if these shelves are necessary to keep here, instead, the What's New shelf can be given a customizable position in the same way that all the other shelves do, and the Game Collection tab can be brought up to the top by default. The next concern is that some users felt that they were exposed to too much sexually explicit content on the store page. Now, while this may be an issue more so related to users' individually tailored algorithms, it's still an area to give them full control over. Convention suggests that users should have to opt into, not out of, mature content. So an easy solution to this is to provide a mature content toggle at the top of the store page. It's fast, accessible, and can even have the addition of sending the user directly to the mature content settings, where they can customize them to whatever their needs are. Moving on to minor concerns, users rarely make use of the Steam chat, oftentimes favoring third-party apps like Discord instead. In order to keep users on platform, Steam should conduct a user feedback survey to find out how to make their chat more competitive with these other apps. However, if Steam doesn't consider the chat to be a priority, it's worth considering alongside these other features, such as the inventory, which is also rarely used, and the discovery queue and workshop, which users have even expressed distaste for. All of these features are underused on the platform, and while there may be an audience for them, if they are not Steam's priority, they should be moved to another part of the app or removed from the platform entirely, because they're just adding clutter to the page for the majority of users. I propose instead that the Steam desktop be modeled more like the Steam mobile app, because the mobile app is much more streamlined and only shows users exactly what they need to see. This adheres better to the heuristic of aesthetic and minimalism, which comes with the benefit of being much easier to navigate. Following up on this recommendation, if Steam does decide to keep the chat feature, consistency and standards to other social applications suggest that the chat feature button should be changed to denote a speech bubble icon, as it'll be more identifiable. Finally, if Steam decides to keep the workshop and discovery queue, then the large text blocks on those pages need to be cut down and replaced with images and videos, as people have limited attention spans, and these graphical formats will be much easier for them to process the information from. Now, when considering the results of this assessment, it's important to note these limitations and mistakes I made in its execution. They have provided valuable information for how to perform future assessments on this topic. Before discussing future steps, I'd first like to define a couple of terms that will be relevant to them. These relate to exploratory behaviors observed in participants as they performed tasks in areas they were unfamiliar with. Secure explorers had a procedural approach. They appeared to perform a depth-first search at the points of navigation that were most relevant to locating their target web page. Insecure explorers had a more spontaneous approach. They appeared to perform a breadth-first search of any point of navigation in their immediate vicinity that seemed even remotely relevant. So, the next steps are to make revisions to the platform based off of my major and moderate recommendations. Once that's done, though, then further assessments should be conducted, but this time with a larger sample size. This is because more opinions are needed when making structural revisions to a platform with an active user base, since you don't want these revisions to disrupt existing users' flow with the platform. During these assessments, special attention should be paid to periods of secure and insecure exploration. This is because secure explorers may reveal optimal routes of navigation, and insecure explorers will reveal pages with an overwhelming amount of information. Finally, a mock revised platform should be built using my minor recommendations and any findings from these next assessments, and it should be tested alongside the original platform. These tests for navigation times should include a healthy mix of experienced and inexperienced users, so that way any of the completion times aren't skewed in a given direction. Alright, well that concludes the presentation. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to reach out and I'd love to chat on the subject further. But otherwise, thank you, and I'll see you next time.